Hello and good afternoon. My name is Kit Cabello, and this is a very different type of episode that we're going to do here for CAN TV. I'm joined here today with my fellow two commentators, Paul DuPont, as well as the co-founder and founder of Hardlands Media, Daniel Lubker. And today we're going to discuss really Chicago politics and this 2019 election cycle that we're in. So this is going to be a historic election cycle because, number one, this is a chance to change the political system that has for a long time controlled most of our everyday lives. And we're looking at aldermen and mayoral candidates step up. We're looking at dynasties falling apart. We're seeing a new interest in voter enthusiasm and people canvassing for their candidate, for their ward. And so, Daniel, Paul, I think first, before we actually start addressing the candidates, especially the 21 candidates that are running for mayor, let's talk about the one issue that people are really hesitant to talk about, or perhaps maybe want to examine once 2019 passes, and that's the legacy of our current mayor, Mayor Rahm Emanuel. So I want to get your thoughts on it because I know I have opinions on it. Under his administration, half the mental institutions have been shut down. 54 schools have been shut down. Numerous African-American Latino communities have been gentrified. Under his administration, he's been very pro-business. Under his administration, we actually nearly had the risk of having Amazon headquarters here. Now, of course, we all know that Amazon was always going to go to Washington, D.C. and New York. But again, a lot of us didn't know. And if Amazon were to show up here, they would get a very nice tax break, something that a lot of us would want. Under Mayor Emanuel's administration, we've seen also a lot of our neighborhoods be impacted to where you have these industrial facilities and asphalt plants and other, dangers that can impact, a community's health. So, and not to mention too, he's turned a blind eye to the lead in our water. So I want to just get your thoughts really on Mayor Emanuel's legacy. I know I've talked about a lot about what he has done, what he hasn't done, but so I think I'll hand it over to Paul first.
Yeah, just real quick. Everything you just said, yes, but I think far and away what will stick the most in most people's minds about Rahm Emanuel's time as mayor of Chicago will be the Laquan McDonald incident. That will be the thing that most people remember. And that's a pretty unfortunate thing for Rahm.
And that took place
that's
during
the thing that's really going to stick. And everything that you said is true, but that's the thing that's going to stick.
And, it's also important to note that took place during his second run for mayor, and his administration worked very hard to cover it up and not speak about it.
That's why it's going to stick so hard.
And I think we've also done our own independent coverage, and we've shown that Emanuel said that this is a sanctuary city. This is for people that if you're undocumented, we will protect you. But in reality, they say, oh, in the city, you'll be safe in the city because if you're undocumented and you jaywalk, we're gonna ship you over to Indiana and they'll take care of you so that we can continue to say that everything's fine and dandy. And we have protected these immigrants because, especially since Laquan McDonald, after it was uncovered that it was a cover-up, he more or less lost the African-American vote. I mean, they were just finished with him. And I mean, he'd already done so much. All the schools that have been closed, it was just like everything that they could be. The city has lost population. It's the only major city to do so, and it's because so many have been kicked out or moving to the suburbs or leaving. That he really needed that Latino coalition, and that wasn't materializing. I think that's the big reason he decided to step down, is that they weren't having it either with him. But I think, especially from our coverage, the idea that he was protecting the city as making a sanctuary city was just a full-out lie. It was just a technicality.
And I just want to add a little context to what Daniel's talking about. Now, earlier on CAN TV, we actually had an interview with an activist, Ruth Needleman. Basically, her organization is bringing attention to what's happening to a lot of immigrants that are being deported out of the country. So in the state of Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, and I think
a little bit of Kentucky.
These states are all basically, if you're an immigrant and you're arrested and you're going to get deported.
I want to say one quick thing on that. When we say arrested, people have a very number of things that they conjure up.
Right.
We're talking jaywalking, shoplifting related. Didn't pay your parking tickets. Because if they're violent or if it's a serious crime, they get put into jail for decades before they're released.
And so minor drug crimes as well.
And so basically,
things like that. If you carry weed.
And so basically, you get bus to this airport in the middle of nowhere. Myself and Daniel drove out there last summer. It was in the perfect spot where no one would ever suspect that something like this is happening. But it's at the Gary Chicago International Airport. It's in the middle of nowhere. It looks completely innocent. You wouldn't expect like people basically being bussed there and being chained like animals and being forced to crawl, not walk, crawl into the airplane. And basically this airport has been going on for X amount of years, and this even includes most of Mayor Rahm Emanuel's administration. So
it goes back to Daley as well.
It goes back to Daley, and the thing is that this has the Chicago government's basically stamp of approval because it's not happening in the city of Chicago. But it's interesting to note that on that day the buses didn't come. The activists were happy about that, but the problem was that those immigrants that were going to be deported were then bused to O'Hare Airport and then flown out from there.
So that's the thing that people don't get. People think right now that Chicago is a sanctuary city, where it's not. No, it's just a sanctuary city in terms of a technicality of it being a sanctuary city. In fact, the only reason O'Hare was used the way that it was is because this airport, which is really, to be clear, it's like a landing strip with a hangar, and it has.
You're talking about the Gary Chicago International.
Yes, the Gary, and so even Kit was talking about the city. Basically, what people don't know, on top of this, just general Chicago politics, is a lot of Indiana that's near Chicago is really the city of Chicago, just not on paper. So we've covered similar with East Calumet and the area around that, but in this case, Gary, that airport is completely, that's what Gary, Chicago, it's completely controlled by the city, because if for example, I think at some point maybe Southwest or one other airline wanted to land more planes at that runway, and so I think it may have been Daley, I don't remember which one of them put this in motion. They said, well, that's fine if you do that, but then you're not allowed to land at Midway. And so they use those kind of strong arm tactics in order to basically control the airport the way they want. And so the deal that was written was, we send all the detainees to you, and now the exception was if they have to deport them straight back to their home country, you need a customs building to do that. And that was the only thing that they didn't have. Of course, when we were there, they were to Gary International. They were in the midst of actually building a customs house so they can completely cut O'Hare out of that and just send about 3 busloads of people every week and deport them.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people don't know about, but that's happening right next door to us. And so if you're an activist and you care about protecting people from being wrongly deported, now's the time to really step up and get involved. But see, this is the problem with Mayor Emanuel, is that universally, I think he's hated all across the city. I mean, if you look at it,
well liked.
The business community,
that is correct. The business community likes him.
Yes.
But the problem is that when you look at communities like, take for example, Pilsen. We've covered Pilsen numerous times. 10,000 people have been displaced. If we look at communities like South Austin, if we look at other communities like in Brighton or on the northwest side of Chicago or any other area of the city, we've seen gentrification happen. And the problem is that when Mayor Emanuel was probably looking at the field, he already had a big war chest. And even before he made that announcement he was going to step down, there were a lot of people saying that he's automatically going to win it. Because let's face it, the Chicago Democratic machine was going to do everything it can to make sure that their guy was going to remain in power. But perhaps something just really spooked him. Perhaps he just had enough, or perhaps there was a rare possibility of him being defeated, and he stepped down. So I want to just change another subject to where we've got 21 mayoral candidates that are running for this key seat of power. And it's interesting to note that one person did step out, Troy Larvier. He was one of our first
one in, first one out.
First one in, first one out, and one of the first mayoral candidates that we did interview. And so it was a little sad to see him, get out of the race. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to note that who's in there right now. We've got a Daley. We've got Tony Prepwinkle, former Cook County president. We have, I guess now former Illinois State Comptroller Susan Mendoza. I have no idea why she's running. She already has a seat. Why run for mayor? I don't know.
Power.
But I digress. I can't read people's minds.
She wants to be mayor.
Who doesn't want to be mayor?
Yeah, who doesn't want to be mayor?
Of the city that has the most direct control of the mayor of Chicago. I think it would be fair to say has the most autocratic domestic control for one person in the entire country. Because in LA, there's more diffusion of power. In New York, it's a machine just like Chicago, but there's a little more diffusion of power. But in Chicago, and I think it's really, Elon Musk actually kind of inadvertently said this when he's trying to, we talked way before about he's trying to build the tunnel
the
Hyperloop.
He's just which we think, which is really ironic, because if it works out in the end, it will make airports obsolete for the most part, except for international flights. But he said when he was trying to deal with LA, when he wanted to dig this, and in fact he canceled his LA tunnel because it was just too much to deal with. It was like every couple blocks he had to deal with a different alderman. He had to get then permission from these housing areas, and because like any wherever his tunnel went under, he had to get permission from those homeowners. And he's like, well, in Chicago, I just basically got to talk to the mayor, and then it's taken care of. And that's the exact reason that the mayor of Chicago is one of the most powerful positions in the country for domestic use, because they can say it's done, and then it's done.
Yeah. Before we jump too headfirst into who's running for mayor next, I wanted to add my one little bit of speculation as to like why did Rahm decide not to run again.
All right, let's hear it.
Here's my little bit of speculation. I think he thinks Joe Biden's going to win it in 2020. I think he wants to hitch his horse to that wagon. Or wagon to that horse. I don't know how the saying goes. I think he had a good spot in the Obama cabinet.
Yeah.
I think he's got a good relationship with Biden. I think he's ready for the 2020 race.
That's a good point. I think then you can combine that, because it's like if he knew he was going to win re-election hands down, he wouldn't have done that, because it's like demoting himself. But if it's like, I don't know, I could do that, or I could focus on this.
But if he had just been dragged through the mud about Laquan McDonald in another election again here in Chicago right before 2020, that don't look so good.
But I'm saying it would still be mayor. It would still be the most powerful position of Chicago. It's like it would downgrade to become a chief of staff again.
I think him thinking that the odds of him losing.
Yeah. So I agree with that. Yeah. So I think that him thinking that he didn't have the best shot made that's a very fair possibility.
I think we could see him maybe, I don't know, somewhat getting involved in 2020. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the background. I mean, it's Rahm Emanuel. He's been involved with politics with the Clintons, the Obamas. I wouldn't be surprised if he chooses the centrist Democrat. I mean, if we don't see him involved, then
watch it be Cory Booker.
Yeah.
Well, here's a funny thing. I don't think it'll be Joe Biden though. Mm-hmm. The reason is Joe Biden's track record is very similar to, I look at him a lot like cannabis in terms of an issue. Everyone loves Biden, but he's like everyone's third favorite topic.
Yeah.
So like Biden's always great until Iowa and then New Hampshire, and then he's like, oh, I didn't win. I'm gone. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. And he leaves.
Yeah.
But I think now let's actually get back on point with the candidates that are running.
2019 race.
Yeah. So we got three people who are definitely involved in the Chicago machine. You got Daley, Prepwinkle, and then you got Mendoza as well. And then looking at the other candidates, the only two that I think that, the other candidates, there's a couple of people who do stand out. There's McCarthy, there's Amara Enya, there's Jamal Green,
Lori Lightfoot,
Willie Wilson. Let's actually
list
them all up.
Yeah, you go for it.
All right, so from top to bottom from this list of the current mayoral candidates, there's 21. There's Willie Wilson, Tony Prepwinkle, Paul Vallis, Jerry Joyce, Catherine Brown Decoon, Corin Clark, William M. Daley, Gary McCarthy, Dorsey Brown, Gary Chico, Sandra Mallory, Susan Mendoza, Amara Enya, LaShawn K. Ford, Neil Sales Griffin, Lori Lightfoot, John Kenneth Kozar, Robert Fiordi, Jamal Green, Roger Washington, and Richard Mayers. So that's a lot of people running for office, and already most of them are being challenged by their other contemporaries for being on the ballot, whether or not their signatures are correct. I know
this is the great signature purge. This list of who there may be the amount of people that there are in right now, but as soon as these ballots, because we've seen firsthand what that ballot system, it costs tens of thousands of dollars to participate in. If you want to defend yourself, if you don't, you're basically done, because then they'll just, like in Madigan's case, he'll take a woman who is no longer recognized to count signatures, and she'll be like, all of these are gone, and then they'll be like, well, there's nothing we can do. She said they were. So you have to have the money, and that's $20,000-$30,000 we're talking to have lawyers fight this.
And that's devastating to a lot of candidates, especially smaller candidates or maybe a progressive candidate that you want to see on the ballot. Now, you need about 12,500 signatures to be fully recognized to be on the ballot, and to be legit.
You want to double that to be...
You want to double
it.
Always double it.
Well, I will say this. Amara Enya's group, they got the largest signature rally. They got about 62,000, I believe, 62,000, maybe 63,000 signatures.
They got a lot.
Nice.
To be on the ballot. So I'm going to say this, even though this is Chicago politics, I think she's okay. And from a current story that I covered this week ago in regards to a lot of these mayoral candidates being challenged by their contemporaries, I think she's in the safe zone right now. But other candidates, not so much. Susan Mendoza is being challenged by Tony Prewinkle. And Tony
Wasn't she the one where they had that sheet where it looked like everyone had the exact same handwriting? Was that, or was that someone else? I know that was going around.
I think that could have been somebody. But again, it's a really hearsay too, because again, it's Chicago politics, man.
No. I mean, there was a picture going around that had. It may have not been her. I don't want to speak improperly, but I remember if you look at it, it's as if like. My handwriting's very distinct. We'll leave it at being distinct. It's as if I signed in the same name for 20 people on one sheet.
You're writing John Bobby and Billy Bob and Steve.
And
all the
it
other
looked
people.
like...
Why are you writing their names and addresses down?
It looked as if someone had done that. And I don't... Perhaps it wasn't her.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make, though, is that the signature part of the campaign is now in session, where they are going to be... fighting each other, saying, no, your signatures are invalid, no, your signatures are invalid. And that's going to knock off probably maybe 5-10 people. It's going to knock off a few people. And it's going to cost them
30 to 50% of the people running will be just out after this phase.
They will be.
I think that's it could be less, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least.
That's a fair assessment.
And not to mention another
because
thing.
a lot of them don't have money. That's the biggest reason I think that'll be the case. Not their signatures are invalid, but I think there's
a lot of this. Oh, this was written in blue pen.
Is not everyone
valid.
Like part of the reason Troy dropped out is he couldn't get the base together he was looking, and therefore he couldn't get the funding. So I think last I checked, he raised he raised less money than it would cost to go through the signature challenge. So if you're someone. What was the guy you met? His dad was getting signatures running for office.
Let me get this correct, and let me try and find his name. But I've run into him now 3 times getting signatures on the streets of Chicago.
There's a lot of people that were working very hard for this. But again, if you don't have the legal representation to defend your signatures, it almost doesn't matter.
I believe it was John Kozar.
Yeah.
And I ran into a couple of people on the streets of Chicago, getting signatures. I think I ran into his dad twice. And it's running a campaign for any office here in this city is going to be expensive. And as Daniel said before, and as we've said numerous times on our show, you can check that out on YouTube. To run a campaign, you need money, and more money, and the right kind of connection and media buzz so that you will be safe. And by safe, it doesn't mean that you're still not going to be challenged, but it's going to be to point to where your opponent. Will it be worth your opponent's time to really waste time going after you or go after a smaller fish? So
even to run for alderman takes over $100,000.
Yeah.
And again, concentrated power, money goes towards it, so it costs more money to deal with it. So again, it's like a lot of these are great candidates, but I don't know their financial situations off the top of my head, so I don't know if they have $30,000 to spend. I don't know if they're going to get challenged.
For the runoff, though, I definitely could see, and again, I could be proven wrong on this. I think we all can be proven wrong who's going to make it to the runoff, but I know that Daley is definitely there, Tony Prewinkle, and then for my third person who I'm going to pick, it has to be Amara Enya. She has got enough media buzz because of Chance the Rapper endorsing her, as well as getting Kanye West to basically pay off her campaign debt, which is important. So her campaign is debt free, and number 2, getting another donation from Kanye West. I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks later after that, it led to a lot of buzz for her campaign. She's really been leading a lot on social media. She was recently on the Young Turks, being interviewed by Cenk Uygur, and she was also interviewed by numerous other Chicago stations here. I think she has a solid chance of being in that lead now.
Here's the thing that I'm trying to figure out. So when you have this many candidates in the race, as we do, what you have to try and figure out is where are each of these groups drawing a base from. And so let's just take Amara Enya as an example. She is a progressive, and she has a pretty established, we know basically what her base is. How much are these other people that are most likely not going to get beyond a couple percent, how much are they going to get away from her percentage, how much is going to be eaten away from Prewinkle. Like Gary McCarthy is a good example of he's going to eat away from both Prewinkle and Daley. And then you have Daniel Biss and Rosa going and endorsing Prewinkle. So it's going to be very interesting to figure out that, because once we get through the signatures and we know who's in, then they're going to get this consolidation phase where all these candidates who think that they're going to win are going to try and get that base back from these other smaller candidates. Oh, they're not going to win. Just come with me. I'll make sure that this win happens. And then we're going to get to the runoff, and then two people that are going to have the most votes are then going to go into an election in April. Chicago politics, everyone.
I know. That's
who was saying, was it your prediction that you thought the three people that would make it past the runoff would be Prewinkle, or was it your prediction? Prewinkle, Amar Enya, and Daley.
Daley, yes.
Prewinkle is the one of those three that I know the least about, and you seem to almost contradict yourself in that you said that you thought that Prewinkle would pull votes from the Daley camp, but also that he was endorsed by Biss. Those almost seem like contradictory statements to me.
No, it's
Rosa's. We were at an event where Rosa, they were irate that he endorsed.
Can I explain what happened? So we were covering an event in which it was at Union Hall, and I know Seattle City Councilwoman Kasama Swan was there.
Oh, really?
And
wow.
Rosa was there as well, and a few other speakers were there. And there was at least some anger towards Alderman Rosa endorsing Prewinkle when a lot of people felt that he should support maybe one of the progressive candidates, either Amara Enya, Jamal Green.
You mean Biss endorsing Prewinkle?
No. Biss was not there. This was Carlos Rosa.
Biss did endorse
this is right. Okay.
Yeah, but Carlos Rosa was there. And there were a couple people there that were kind of vocal about him supporting Tony Prewinkle. Now, the thing is, under Tony Prewinkle's time as Cook County president, this is also when Barrios was in charge. And, of course, under Barrios' administration as Cook County assessor, there was a clear lack of open transparency in that office. So, and as a result, basically all the tax burden came onto us, homeowners, renters, people who live in here in the city of Chicago and Cook County. And then if you go into the downtown area of Chicago, all the large buildings, law firms, businesses were basically, they pay zero in taxes. So this was going on under her administration.
Heavily reduced taxes.
Yeah, heavily reduced taxes. So this was so Barrios was following this policy, and this was also happening under Tony Prewinkle's administration. Now I don't know what her relationship was with Barrios at the time. I'm pretty sure they probably did butt heads here and there, but a lot of people are angry about that because we've talked about it before. A mass exodus is happening in this city, and so when we were covering that event, a lot of people were just saying to Carlos Rosa, how come you're not supporting a more progressive candidate that's running in the race? Why are you going to the establishment? And I could see why he is endorsing Prewinkle, but I think right now a lot of people are really excited about Mayor Emanuel not being in this race, and they want to actually have somebody to represent them, because for so long under Mayor Emanuel's administration, we already covered it as this show started.
Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
That they did the endorsement before Chance and Kanye endorsed Amara.
That's correct.
And so I think from their point of view, the way I read it was that them and some groups behind
they were thinking
them
he had the best chances.
Were like, hey, if we can get Prewinkle, he's not as bad as Daley, and we can get some progressive concessions out of it, that'll be pretty nice. I think that's the thought process that they were going with, but they, I think, jumped a little too early, because I think if they had waited maybe a month, they may have acted differently.
Yeah.
You think because they underestimated how far Amara Enya's campaign would go?
Who would predict that Chance would come in? I mean,
and who would predict that Kanye West would come in? Because when we covered one of their rallies, when we covered one of their rallies, and Amara Enya was there, she gathered a huge crowd. There was like 300 people there. The whole city, the whole block.
And you knew Chance was going to be there, but you didn't know Kanye was going to be there?
No, yeah. I was thinking in my mind mentally, and I even said this to Daniel just before we started filming. It'd be something if Kanye West showed up.
There's no way he's coming. It was right.
Yeah, and no, it was like I was joking with Daniel at the time, and I was like, it'd be funny if he showed up. And I'm thinking as I'm filming it, then all of a sudden I'm seeing a person walk in the background, and I think, oh my God, it's Kanye West. And I'm like this far. I can't do it with the cameras right now, but we're like this far away. So it's like,
insane.
You know, it's like, oh wow, Chance the Rapper and Kanye West and Amar Enya is running for mayor. So it was something to see, and perhaps maybe if some progressive groups did hold back on, you know, endorsing any said candidates, I think things would be a little bit different. Yeah. But I think also it's important to note that a lot of people want to reverse the policies that Mayor Emanuel has done. And under a potential new mayor, do you think that we can get some reversals, like having some of these schools open again? I mean, using the TIF funds properly, if possible.
Well, it depends on who the new mayor is.
Obviously, I mean, who's the mayor, what their coalition. I think it really.
Who do you think can do the job? Because not to mention, look, the office of mayor is a very powerful seat, but then you also have to contend with the city council too.
Yeah, I think that I've always looked at it that whenever a candidate's running, I care much more about who is surrounding them than the candidate themselves, because who surrounds them are the people that actually make the action happen. So if they surround themselves with just law firms and lobbyists, you know exactly what they're going to do. You don't have to guess. It's already known. You can write it in stone ahead of time and you'll be right. But if you have, like, maybe in Pratt & Whitney's case, it's like, well, they have some of that, but then they also needed these progressives to then it's like well, now I need to please both of these bases because they got me into power, so I have to please them. And so I mean, we'll see. I think that I feel I wish I would love to pick Rosa or Biss's brain on how they think about their choice, but of course they would have to, at this point they would say no, we're going to go with this because they already picked. But it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Again, right now it's challenge season.
I know Willie Wilson has been very vocal about, and this was like, I think a month ago, where he's actually said to the Chicago Tribune and Chicago Sun-Times both reported this, where he said that all the African American candidates need to drop out of the race. Like, just like that. Just get out of the race. It was just more, I think, so he could get more of their support base's support and
he
vote.
thought by saying African Americans shouldn't run in this race, he was going to win the African American vote.
That's how it works, I guess.
Well, Willie Wilson,
remember, $300 at a time. Remember? Yeah. Remember that when that first happened? He went to that church and he's like, "Take some money, everyone. Take some." And then remember that interview when you asked him about that?
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, look, we've interviewed a lot of people, and it was one of those interesting things just to bring up. It just, for him, it was nothing. And
he was like, "It's not illegal, so I'm not going to stop. If it is illegal, I will stop." And it's like, at least I greatly respect that he's very direct about it. He's not trying to be like, "Oh, I'm not."
One question before we completely wrap up. We've been discussing the mayoral race in terms of, it sounds like we all agree that Amar Enya is probably the most progressive candidate in the field.
And probably the one who has...
Are we in agreement there?
I would say that she's the... I think you could argue, easily that she would be the most progressive, but I also think that she's... Of the two people that are going to reach the runoff, there are three people that right now seem like they have a chance of it, and she's it. So I think that's even more important at this point. Yeah. That you can be as progressive as you want, but if you're not going to make it to the finish line,
it's
almost irrelevant.
She's probably going to be the most successful progressive candidate.
Yes.
That's the way.
Number one, media buzz. 2, her campaign has no debt. 3, it's a lot of attention to her campaign. And 4, I think she has a huge coalition support from the progressives. So other than that, Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. Paul, same thing for you. I know that this is a little different how we normally do our interviews for Hard Lens Media, but we're going through a couple of changes, so please follow us on our webpage, hardlensmedia.com. Check us out on our YouTube channel, Facebook page, Twitter account, and Instagram. Other than that, peace, everyone, and let us all do what we can to build a better future. Take care.
Have a good one.